And in our main segment here today on Mastering Dungeons, we are going to talk about the best of Rime of the Frostmaiden. As we have been doing, we will continue our series of looking at these old 5th edition adventures and pulling them apart to see what is best about them, what really makes them sing. And in this episode, again, we're going to look at Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden, where a Duergar despot forging a dragon out of Chardalyn, a lost city of magic entombed in a glacier, a frozen wilderness trapped in Auril's grip. These three plot elements woven together form this adventure. And we'll give our typical warning here. One, there will be spoilers. So if you have not played it and you are going to play it, thank you for listening this far, but we'll catch you next time. And we understand that these adventures that we're reviewing are not perfect. Yeah. Just because we are focusing on what we liked about them and what we think is best about them does not mean we don't understand that they're not great sometimes. So just be aware, you don't need to add us with this adventure was terrible. And well, how could you say? It's because we are choosing to focus on the positives in this series. And if you want to hear anything negative that we might have had to say, check out episodes like 300 through 380 or whatever.
I think it's 20 through like 50 or so. It's a lot, but it's back in the origins of this show, before we even changed names. It's way back in episode 9 of when you and I started recording, I think. And it goes all the way through 23, 24 or so parts, maybe even more, at episode 29. So, we may have covered this adventure in some detail.
we covered it page by page, much to some people's joy and much to other people's chagrin.
You could read it in less time.
This is true.
Today.
This is true. So let's talk about the history of this adventure first. Teos, you want to lead us through the history?
Yeah, I mean, I love this, looking at all this. This is the 9th major hardback adventure, officially announced on June 18th, 2020, during the annual D&D live event, or then annual. The big D&D live event that had been planned was supposed to be an event like the Descent into Avernus event that we raved about last year. But there was this little thing, Shawn, called the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, it's funny because I went to Wizards of the Coast after Winter Fantasy of 2021 to plan for this big live event. And I remember people that traveled in for this meeting from like Australia and Japan, I think, and they were starting to get rumblings of there's something bad happening, and people are starting to shut down airports overseas, and sure enough, within another month, everything had been shut down, including the planning for this event.
Yeah. So you can go online and get a snapshot of where we were by watching these old videos. We've got links in our show notes. And, it's Anna Prosser from her home and Deborah Ann Wall from her home and all these other folks, that run this event. You just see their rooms behind them, because that's the world we were in all of a sudden. And so it was a very different event. There weren't all these live play tables. We had to do it online. And sometimes that created neat things. Like, one of the things that I'm really proud of, Shawn, is we ran the excellent adventure that you wrote. We ran some intro, like an intro epic online, which was hard, but we figured it out because it had been written, of course, to be in person. And we ran it including with games in Spanish for free, which brought in folks that otherwise couldn't afford to do these kinds of events. And it also brought in people who had been sort of, I think, like tangential to the industry, but then became really invested. I'm not going to say that it was because of this, but maybe it helped. But there are a number of designers that I now see all the time who are based in various Spanish-speaking countries who were at those tables, which is really fun. And the online games that were streamed included celebrities like Game of Thrones cast members, David Harbour of Stranger Things, others. This is also when Baldur's Gate 3 was coming out. It was delayed a bit, but we saw the trailer, and then the gameplay walkthrough was one of the sessions at this D&D live event. IGN had a concurrent stream, which is interesting, covering the reveal. And various partners were announced on both streams. So you kind of had to watch both to get every little bit of news. Really just interesting, different time.
Yep. The title and the cover leaked the week before the announcement because D&D Beyond accidentally posted a promotional video that was immediately taken down via YouTube. But enough people saw it where they were getting some sneak peeks ahead of time. And the book itself was published on the 15th of September of 2020. An alternative cover designed by the artist Hydro74 was available through local game stores, and Teos has a wonderful copy of that right there. Beetle and Grimm, the Wizards of the Coast licensee, released 2 different special edition limited run versions of Rime of the Frostmaiden. There was the Platinum Edition at $550 and the Silver Edition at $175. And as we talked about in our news and commentary section, $500 is a bargain at this point for the main whale tier of adventures.
It is true to say that these days it's almost reasonable. There was also an excellent dice and miscellany set, which I think back then was viewed as high priced, with 11 dice, a map, and NPC and creature cards all in a small box. I think I'm using those dice currently for my Dagger game. Really nice set, really fun how they did that. They had comic books set in Icewind Dale, as well as Stranger Things comic books that came out at this time. The licensed Hero Feast D&D cookbook was announced, which, many of us laughed at and then were proven wrong as we saw the huge volume of copies that were later reported to have been sold. There were clothing licenses, WizKids miniatures, Shawn, left and right. We have an enormous Chardalyn big boy dragon I'm holding up over my shoulder. That one, you can see the white dragon that has a dead rider on it. We've got this frost giant riding a mammoth. I mean, just super neat. And you can actually take them off and stand them up with a different set of legs. Just all kinds of really great stuff supporting this, and superfluous, of course, stuff supporting this.
The book was also released in digital form. Oh, did you have something else to add?
The only thing I was going to say was this is also the year that Tasha's Cauldron of Everything came out, which has my favorite alt cover that I'm holding up, my favorite cover of all time for alt covers. Absolutely gorgeous. And that was in November, and Mystic Odysseys of Theros came out in July. So a very strong year, when you look at those other 2 releases, but maybe not as voluminous, but there was a lot of licensing there. And we're going to talk about the digital releases.
Yeah, digital releases were done through D&D Beyond, Fantasy Grounds, and Roll20. Because remember, D&D Beyond was still its own entity at that point. We forget that it was its own thing, and then it was bought by Wizards. That was a licensee at that point. Season 10 of the D&D Adventurers League took place in Icewind Dale at that point. And it's worth mentioning how the theme of isolation and horror really matched the time in which this book was published, because everyone was stuck at home thanks to the pandemic. And horrified. And so it was sort of a strange coincidence, but definitely the vibes were matching a bit as we got through this adventure and that pandemic. And
even to the point where I wondered, and maybe still wonder, whether it was a negative thing, whether it was too much, right? To just sort of have it be heavy in that way. But people seem to resonate with the theme. What was communicated marketing wise was really heavy on the, the Thing movies and things like that. And I don't know that it really is those things, but people seem to, enjoy that vibe, and it resonated with them and piqued their interest.
So let's look at the best of this adventure, and we'll start, as we always start, with the premise and the approach. So this is an adventure for levels 1 to 12, focused, of course, on Icewind Dale. overall, they say certain things, sometimes certain adventures are greater than the sum of its parts. And I think if you go back to our old discussions, you will find out that this adventure is a poster child for the sum of its part being much less than the individual parts. And I think what we're going to end up focusing on here a lot is some of the great set pieces, some of the great individual encounters, some of the great premises that the adventure calls a DM to follow, whereas the adventure itself as a whole might not have hit all of the beats in exactly the right order to make it a truly memorable campaign.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And we know people, you know, one of the reasons we love covering the positive side of things is because we hear from people that we really value who talk about the blast they have running this adventure multiple times. And I think that is the real thing, is that if you can weave those parts together in a way that really works for you and your group, that makes sense and that feels epic with the telling of it, then it's going to be great. If you run it in a way that feels like you solved the problem halfway through the adventure and you don't know why you're doing the second part, then this is not going to be great, right? And so it's about finding your path through this so that all those neat bits can come together. There's also so much here that you get that choice of whether you want to deliberately choose which parts to link together, in which case you may want that to make sense and feel like real connections. Or do you want this to feel really sandboxy and just tell lots of different disconnected stories? All of that is a big part in determining how wonderful this will be for you at your table. I have not run this adventure, but I have contemplated it many times because I think I could actually weave this into something that I would very much enjoy running if I were to spend that time.
This isn't in our show notes, but I went back and I looked at some of the reviews of when it first came out. And generally those first reviews are very positive. And what I heard from a couple different reviews was how easy this was to run for a DM who's not prepared. And my thought was, I felt the opposite when I was reading it, and I did have to read quite a bit of it in order to do the writing that I did. So I didn't run it, but I was familiar enough with it, and I did play in parts of it. And I thought, this is a nightmare to run as a game master. But then I realized that the pieces, though, were well done. But it's the putting together the campaign that would take a lot of thought and a lot of time. So there are, and it opened my eyes, even at this point in my career, to there being different types of work that go into DMing. And it's not necessarily the picking the monsters and building the encounter. And it's not necessarily putting a story together that makes sense and is pleasing to the players. It's the amalgam of things, where something can be very easy to do in one part of that work and very hard to do in another part.
Yeah, no, that's really true. That's really true. All
right. So the story tells us that the sun does not shine on Icewind Dale, and it hasn't for the last 2 years, because Auril, the goddess of winter, has retreated to this part of the world, and she is using her power every morning to spread magic across the sky. This magic will keep the sun from appearing, and it blows cold air across the lands that are north of the spine of the world. So that's the premise going into the adventure. This is the problem that the players are going to be introduced to if you sort of run the opening parts of the adventure as written. There are also 2 subplots that are sometimes the focus, or sometimes not, or sometimes completely the focus of the adventure. The wizards of the Netherese city of Ithrin crashed with this city here, leaving it buried under the Reged Glacier on the eastern edge of Icewind Dale. So this city is now buried in ice, and it holds a Netherese demi-lich and a Mythalar, which is a powerful magic item that can do things like power earth motes or control the weather within a 50-mile radius. So the characters can use this device to counteract Auril's spell and free Icewind Dale from her everlasting rime. Except, of course, that it's probably much easier just to kill the weakened goddess than it is to actually go to this city. The second subplot is Zardarok Sunblight, a Durgar warlock, wants to rule a kingdom on the surface of this world. And Icewind Dale seems like as good a spot as any. So to achieve his goal, which is really driven by the devil Asmodeus, although Sunblight thinks that it's coming from the Durgar goddess Deep Dura. Zardarok needs Chardalyn. I pronounce it Chardalyn. I don't know how you pronounce it. To create a dragon which will destroy the 10 towns. And that Teos is holding up that Chardalyn dragon. Zardarok's
way
sons,
cooler than its stat block, sadly. But
yeah. Zardarok's sons, Dirth and Nildar, lead team of Duergar on quest to retrieve more of this dark-colored crystal with which they plan to make this constructed dragon.
Which ties all into the history of Icewind Dale and Drizzt Do'Urden and the crystal shard and all of that.
So let's talk about the background in the overview, Teos.
And it's a really nicely done section. They do a number of things that are very thoughtful to create what can be a really exciting and successful start to an adventure. They look at all of the player handbook backgrounds and they think, okay, what will it be like to be in Icewind Dale? How can we connect that character to this setting? Really neat. They introduce Goliaths as a playable species. There is a table of Icewind Dale specific trinkets. And then there's this great section called Character Secrets, where even if it's a little tough to use, there are some really neat kind of hooks and pieces here that you can make the most of. And a lot of players have shared stories of how fun it was to play their secret. Now, you've got some advice in here that is important.
Yeah. So these sorts of secrets that the players have or the players know or something that the player is that no one else knows can be an awesome, awesome way to enter a campaign. But there are a few tips that I learned while playing this adventure, and I've also just thought about over time. So you need the right campaign with the right characters and the right players. Because if a secret goes out too long, it loses its impact. People might forget about it. Players might forget that they even have them. So you want the secrets to be revealed at a pace that makes them memorable and important, but not interminable.
Yeah, absolutely.
One way you can do that is to layer secrets so that one secret might have 3 different points to reveal. And you can pace those out so that the first reveal is that, oh, I may look human, but I'm not. Then the second release might be, well, actually, I'm a doppelganger. Right. And the third reveal might be, I am a doppelganger that is wanted back in Waterdeep for a 200,000 gold piece reward because I assassinated some noble, right? If you can do that, you can have these things that come out at a pace that makes them memorable and keeps them top of mind without overwhelming a campaign with them.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing that requires some work in this adventure, right? Because if you are an owlbear whisperer and owlbears actually love you, well, that's fun, but only if the DM remembers to put in an owlbear. Or pirate cannibal, I served aboard the Dark Duchess, a pirate ship. Only good if you get the players to that location, which may or may not happen. On top of being a spy for the Harpers, or I was raised by Yeti, right? There's some very fun ones though, and I think if you can find that balance of how to run these. And give the players those cards that are in the appendix, then it can be really fun. And maybe, feel free to tweak them so that they will match the campaign and tweak your campaign to match those secrets so they come out at good moments. And you're right. The worst thing with a character secret is to hold on to it session after session. Doppelganger is a great example. Anytime you're trying to pretend you're not what you are and you're trying to go 10 sessions, like it just loses its impact. And much better is to actually tip off the fellow players pretty early on and have them in on the secret. And it's really the secret that plays against NPCs and other things like that. And that's when it becomes actually much more interesting than if you're trying to hide it from the players. And surprise.
Yeah. And you want them to be equal in weight, at least somewhat, because we got one secret here that's Drist fan. I once met the Dristord, and I have a tattered piece of his famous green cloak and would never think of parting with it. And that's funny and it's cute, but compared to something like I am not the species that you think, or I have a slod tadpole implanted in me that could go off at any point. Right. One is like, oh, isn't that cute? The other is like, my game could end at any point and I could turn into a monster. Right. Slightly different.
I was on a spacefaring mind flayer ship, right? It's pretty different.
Right. Yeah. So keep that in mind. But I love the setup for this adventure. I love all of these things that a DM and players can lean into. You could tell that the team that worked on this really wanted the players to feel this sense of isolation, this sense of the unknown, this sense of not gothic horror, but this isolation horror as the campaign went on.
Yeah, absolutely. And that continues into the next section, Shawn. So we get this chapter 1, the 10 towns, which previously on the show, we covered, town by town.
We did.
And in part because this takes material in previous novels and adventures, especially the D&D Next adventure, Legacy of the Crystal Shard, and just really gives you a source book on each of these towns, right? Bremen, Bryn Shander, Dugan's Hall, you name it. They all get just so much information, and they have hooks and NPCs and maps and really interesting things going on. Usually there is a quest that is both resolved in town, but probably something that takes you a little ways out of town. But the action is focused, which is very smart, on the 10 towns themselves. The hard part is finding, for me as DM, because I'm the kind of person who will analyze choices endlessly, thinking about which ones to run in, and because you can't do them all, or at least not with the kind of plot that's supposed to happen here and the timeline is supposed to happen. So you sort of need to think about which towns to visit, which may happen organically, and you just see how it goes. But then you deal with the fact that, there's that great quest we never got to because, they wanted to go left, and I thought right would be more fun. So that can be either easy or tough, as you said, for DMs. If you just love to fly by the seat of your pants, then it can be great, and you don't have to necessarily prep as much. But if you really want to plan it out and weave together a stronger narrative and provide some choices within that narrative, then you have to do all this prep. And that can be a lot of reading, a lot of prep, right? When you and I were reviewing these, we read a ton of material and had to really think through it, which is what I think makes you and I think this is a hard adventure to run, because we're the type of people to put in that kind of work and that connective tissue. And that requires really understanding all the towns from the very beginning, which is hard.
Mm-hmm. And in addition to the plots of the 10 towns, and like Teos said, each one is given, each town is given in great detail, and the plots are relevant to that town. There are 2 starting quests. And these starting quests are where you as the DM, if you don't want to create your own start, you can grab one of these 2. And I really love the Chwinga one as I went back and reviewed it. Chwingas are these elemental cold beings, and they're CR0. They're not deadly at all, but they were beloved by the players and the people that were taking part in this adventure. They're tiny creatures, so they would steal cutlery and they would do pranks, and you would find them as you rounded a corner, and they would be there interacting with you in fun ways. So they were sort of this cool, neat, cute thing that you could use. And if you were devious, then you could use them to up the cute factor and then sort of twist it later as the elemental danger got more and more. You could either use the Chwingas to foretell catastrophe on the way, or have them turn out maybe not as cute and nice as you had been playing them originally.
Yeah, it was interesting seeing that, and the contrast between that quest and the other one, which is this cold murderer who's going around, killing people with ice daggers, and so and far more deadly encounter. But it's what's neat about this is if you can work through the material here and forge that really neat story, there are some just amazing settings to explore. And that continues into chapter 2, which takes you into sort of the surroundings of the 10 towns. It kind of takes you, one ring out from the towns itself and what's right by those towns. And so you now follow on these larger quests and rumors. We have these tall tales in 10 towns, 11 different encounters outside of the safety of the towns. These lead to places of interest that we find in the chapter. Wilderness encounters, and I loved that. We talked about this in Raid about the 20 random wilderness encounters, but it has a really neat table, right, Shawn?
Yeah, the table is great because you have a D20 for 1 to 20 encounters, but you also are supposed to roll a blizzard die. And the blizzard die goes next to your encounter die. So you roll your encounter die, you roll your blizzard die. If the result of the blizzard die is equal to or one greater, if it's one greater or more than the encounter die, the encounter you're about to run takes place in a blizzard.
Yeah.
So mathematically, the first encounter 1 called Yeti, always will take place in a blizzard because you will always have at least rolled 1 + 1 on the blizzard die. And then as you go, it's harder and harder for these encounters to take place in a blizzard, but it gives you a twist on these 20 wilderness encounters turn into sort of 40 wilderness encounters if the blizzard changes the aspects of that encounter enough.
Yeah, and I love the stories and scenes that are brought to life in these encounters. I mean, it's the kind of stuff that when you explain to people, what D&D can provide as experiences, it's these kinds of things, right? Arviatorus, the white worm with its dead rider, which is, over my shoulder here, the mini, the wrecked ship, the Dark Duchess, and the idea of stepping onto ice floes, getting onto this wrecked ship, exploring it. Then, you can imagine in the middle of this snowstorm, this white worm, coming at you because that's its lair. The super dangerous black cabin, the, frost giants on mammoths, which we have that enormous mini for. We have a crashed mind flare ship with mind flare gnomes on it and a lot of sphincter doors. We have this really neat goblin camp, and the leader has a secret, which is they aren't a goblin. So you have that fun situation within everything else you're doing involving the goblins. And you could take that goblin camp scenario and just put it in any campaign because it's interesting enough. An upside down Netherese tower that fell into the ice. And then Revel's End, the prison that would later show up in the D&D movie, right? There are just so many really interesting, cool scenes that are really excellent in this chapter.
And this adventure is structured as a toolbox in a way that is very easy to use to understand pacing. So these random encounters, these wilderness encounters, are short. They're encounters. The places of interest are a little larger. They're more like layers. So you might be like a one shot with them, right? It might take 2 to 4 hours to fully explore these 11 places of interest throughout. And of course, they all have clues to other places or other plots or other things. So
yeah,
you're revealing other plots as you run these random encounters or these events. And then what we're about to discuss, chapters 3 through 7, are specific adventuring sites or specific adventures that are going to be even longer. So these are probably going to take 1 or more sessions to get through these 5 different locales or long-term interesting adventure stories. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And so these locations are supposed to sort of really move the plot forward. Though one of the things that's tough is depending on what you ran, you may or may not be doing that. Like,
Right.
oh, suddenly we're dealing with Dwergar, and I didn't do any of the stuff in the 10 towns that was Dwergar related, right?
Yeah.
That could be okay, but you're sort of like, really, there have been Dwergar problems.
Right.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we had talked. That's why we
Mhm.
spent,
So much
10
time.
plus
Yeah.
episodes talking about this.
Yeah, and so if you can weave that together, then what you get is there's some really interesting ideas that are going on here. The Destruction's Light, where they're building the Chardalyn dragon, and if you are able to maybe impact things there or respond to the dragon emerging. We talked also about there's a lot of confusion here, not only about avalanches, I had to say it, but also about how the dragon flies and where it'll get to and exactly how this math works out. But if you can find a satisfying way to that, then the idea of saving the towns from that can be really interesting. There's the idea that you can go to Auril's abode. And Auril the Frostmaiden has this really neat sort of fortress in a floating island of ice and snow. And you can explore it. And we talked, I think it was episode 24 around there, how to make the most of Auril's interesting 3-form stat block, which I think a lot of people struggled with. But it is a really interesting 3-phase fight. If you can think through what the tactics should be that Auril should use, given that she's a goddess, and even if the idea is she's weakened herself a lot through this ritual she constantly uses, and that's why she's defeatable. But that's a kind of, it can be a really neat fight if you can think through how to make that feel epic. What else? We've got the Caves of Hunger, that you then go through. So you sort of like save the town, save some number of 10 towns, and hopefully better than 0. And you have maybe ended the Rime. And there's a sort of weird part where sort of this evil person comes up in a sled and goes, "Get in, losers. We're going to, unearth this Netherese city." And you should probably go, I don't get into cars with strangers who are evil and want to exploit Netherese artifacts, but also B, let's just leave it sealed up. Why would we do that? And so a lot of DMs will change it up to be that, like, you can't truly defeat Auril and stop the Rime until you do something in the city. And then that creates a longer payoff, and a reason why you have to make a deal with this dangerous evil person to go into this ancient Netherese city, which is amazing. Like, it is, there are so many neat Will Doyle and Stacey Allen ideas in that chapter that are just really, really wild and interesting. If you can go through the Caves of Hunger and into that Doom of Yithrin, buried in this glacier, which, by the way, Shawn, Neverwinter just released a new module, and it is all about the Ragged Glacier and Netherese impacts and stuff. We'll see where it goes, but it's funny that they're actually exploring that now, because they had skipped it back then because they had done so much Icewind Dale in the past. So
so that's all of that. What you said is true, and I sort of want to slow down and reiterate a little bit.
Yeah, please.
Every one of these larger chapter adventures. So the Sunblight Fortress, Destructions. So the Sunblight Fortress is where the Duergar are building the Chardalyn dragon. And so either accidentally or following the trail of the other Duergars throughout the 10 towns, you are able to figure this out, that something bad is happening there, and you can head off. You get a 37 area dungeon in this chapter, right? So, even if you only go to 2/3 of that, you're still talking about a 20 plus area dungeon. So it's going to take you probably multiple sessions to get through, because there are lots of fights happening there. Even if you get tricky and sneak around, you still are going to run into enemies. It is a great set piece standalone thing. If you want to make it a full campaign, You just have to make sure that you highlight the Duragar parts of the 10 towns and the Duragar parts of those other random encounters, wilderness encounters, or places of interest.
Yep.
The connection between the Sunblight and the Destruction's Light is, as Teos said, sort of weird and tenuous, because they're building the Chardalyn dragon to set it loose to destroy the 10 towns. And it's sort of like, as you go up to Sunblight Fortress, you see the dragon fly away, and you're still not quite sure. You may not be sure what's going on.
Yeah.
And by the time you figure out what's going on in the fortress, if you like find a place to take a long rest, or you somehow leave and then come back, but don't really check in anywhere, the 10 towns may be pretty much destroyed by the time you figure out what's going on. So you want to time it, and you want to give clues so that the players are making a choice. And this is one of those things where if your players don't like what's like a choice that's bad no matter what, sort of a Sophie's choice of because you get into the fortress and you figure out that, oh my gosh, they just sent this dragon away. You found these plans, and you realize that this dragon is out there right now destroying towns. Yeah. And if you don't leave the fortress, there's a good chance that it's going to wreak havoc, and you're not going to be able to stop it. Mm-hmm. But it's very hard for players to want to walk away from the thing that they're in. Yeah, and that's not a character thing. That's a player thing. Yeah. So you want to mold the experience in a way that lets the players off the hook one way or the other. Mm-hmm. Let them off the hook if they choose to continue in Sunblight Fortress. Slow the dragon down, right? Yeah. Or the other way, give them an easy way to leave and get back in, whether it's a portal or a flying machine or something that lets them get out and get back without feeling like they're missing something important.
Yeah, and one of the things that's tough is, even though they give you a sort of map and route of, where the dragon will fly, it's really hard to say to the players, or give the players anything where they can say, oh, therefore I think this is the strategy, or we should either do X or Y. The reality is there's sort of it's hard even as DM to figure out how this works, but it's very easy for the players to go, well, let's go to the town it would have gone to first. Well, if you do that, it's already gone by the time you arrive. And in fact, you'll probably doom the next 4 towns because it'll take you so long to then adjust. So you actually need to give them, very importantly, sort of the information that'll lead them to get to the town where you think they should get to in time to do something representative of how long they took to decide to finally go, if that makes sense. Yeah. But if you do that, but you've got to let them know, because otherwise they'll just go like, we don't even know where to go. Let's go back inside. Yep. Right.
Don't just give them the information, interpret the information for them. Yeah. Because the information can be problematic and hard to understand. So you're going to have to give the players some help in figuring out all of that. Yeah. If you can do that, this is an amazing experience because it gives the players that agency to plan, to say, all right, if we go here, we'll have the best chance of stopping it. But if we go here, we can stop it sooner, right? That sort of thing.
And they may even have to go to more than one town because the thing will run away from them. So you may have to like do a battle, then run to get to the next one, do the second part of the battle, but that can be very fun too. The Alexandrian we covered, a blog series on sort of what the flight times are actually like. So that can be worth looking at. But in the end, you just want to kind of think through what fits the players given where you are in the campaign and just make that neat and epic feeling so that they have a good time.
Yep. Auril's Abode, I just want to point out, as Teos said, I loved that idea, and I love the encounters within Auril's Abode. But you have to be aware that you can literally accidentally solve the problem without even knowing it. Because again, major spoiler here, all you have to do is kill the rock that Auril rides, and you've solved the situation.
Somehow.
and you might not want that to be the solution to the full problem. So
Yeah.
just be aware that you want people to go there. You want people to experience it. You might even want people to fight Auril in her 3 forms. But as Teos said, you don't want to just say, oh, and there's the end of the adventure. You want it to be a step in the process of solving this problem.
Yep.
If you want to run the entire adventure. If you don't want to run the entire adventure, just end it there.
That's true.
And that's perfectly okay.
Yeah, and a way to do it is there is this tome in the basement level, and so one of the things you can do is say, well, that tome tells you what is powering this ritual, and by the way, it's this Netherese city. So you got to go there and turn that thing off, because the thing that's sending all this energy this way, it's a conduit, and Auril will reform, and she'll just do it again. She can get a rock. She knows how to find some sort of beast that will fly for her. She's a goddess. That's not the problem. The problem is this source of power that's coming from this Netherese city. You got to go deal with that. Okay, now that gives you the longer term plan.
Yeah. And then the Caves of Hunger is a 39 area dungeon that the characters must navigate to reach the beginning of the lost Netherese city. You could almost skip the Caves of Hunger if you want. You could almost just go directly to the city. There again, it's a really great set piece. There are many wonderful, wicked, cool encounters. But read it over and figure out do I need to do this, or can I just go straight to Ithrin? And then Ithrin again, another wonderful set piece. So many cool things. 29 area dungeon with some sub areas within it. The art is amazing. The location's epic. It's almost worth like just pulling out and using it in a different campaign if you want. So pieces of the adventure, great. Overall flow needs your attention in order to make it work as a campaign. But Teos, we are not done.
No.
Because there is an epilogue.
There is an epilogue. Yes, we could try to forget that there is one.
I think this could be one of the great endings for an adventure.
Yeah. Okay.
If with a little more information, because the epilogue says, hey, if you stop the everlasting rime, great. This is what happens. Okay, cool. I like that, right? I like to be helped as the game master to say, all right, they succeeded. What does the future look like? Oh, they fail, which they possibly could. All right, if they fail, what does the future look like? Now, as the game master, I have a roadmap forward for what to do next if they succeed, what to do next if they fail. I don't expect the adventure to do it for me. I understand adventures need to end. Then there's this weird one. The weird one is the players do a certain thing and they go back in time to before the fall of Netherese. So we're talking millennia back in time, where Waterdeep and Baldur's Gate don't even exist yet.
Yeah.
And as I was reading that, all I could think was, this is so cool. This is what I want. Right? This is what I want the adventure to be. I want there to be Icewind Dale Part 2. Right?
Go back in time.
The fall of Netherese.
Where you and Marty go back in time and
and it almost seemed cruel.
They just leave it with like, and this would happen.
Yeah, it's really bizarre, and I love time travel adventures. I love this idea of go back in time, fix the problem that either the enemy caused or that you caused, and then get back to the future. And it just sort of dropped it there, and it made it sound so interesting. And then it was,
and then nothing.
How do you do it? Yeah.
So I have a couple of real big issues with the sort of epilogue ending pieces. I do love, the brilliance of it, the audacious nature of it is great. the problem is, to me, the key problem is the players don't know what they're doing and aren't actually making choices. So there is a scroll, for example, that sounds like, oh, cool, this will solve the problem. And it releases a Tarrasque, which then will not only solve your problem, it'll then destroy the 10 towns, which is the whole reason you're here, I guess, unless you're self-motivated, and then proceed down the Sword Coast, destroying it. And I'm like, man, if you end a campaign that I play in for a year with the like, you didn't know what this did, and so you just destroyed everything, I'm going to be so mad. And then there is the use this artifact and you don't even know that you're traveling back in time. Like there's no choice. You're acting without information. And now you're just going to suddenly be like, so guys, I'm either going to run this time travel campaign or we stop here. I'm going to be like, yeah, no, we're done. What else is out there? And that's the thing, is I think to make it awesome, you need to look at these things as interesting but tough choices, because you can't just turn off a Netherese city. So what are you going to do, right? And maybe the Tarrasque shouldn't destroy everything, but maybe there's then that little extra bit, if you're willing to put in the effort of how do you stop the Tarrasque to prevent it from going out of control. Now we've got an interesting next part that we can run and the DM can have fun with. If we look at this time travel as a really neat experience where we have to do a thing and then go back, cool. And you're right, I want to see that adventure because that would be awesome. That would have been a great supplement for them to have produced out there.
Right.
But I don't like the idea that you just don't know what you're dealing with, right? And that some other party can just simply do a thing and, oh, look, everything's taken care of just fine and nothing went wrong. And so that's the part that, you've got to somehow sand it down. And I'll say that Crack the Sun has some time travel.
There you go. Now I may have had something to do with that. I don't know.
And maybe we'll do.
Yeah. But we are not done yet because there are appendices. Appendix A has those trinkets. Characters love trinkets. I love to see trinkets specifically for a setting. The character secrets we already talked about is Appendix B. Appendix C, a ton of new creatures. Yeah. Probably the most new creatures in any adventure. I mean, there are
good question.
Gnome Ceramorphs, gnome squidlings. If you have a penchant for Mind Flayer gnomes, a ton of new beasts, including a giant walrus and the knucklehead trout. The Chardalyn dragon, of course, many Duergar, the Hypnos Magian, many arcane features because the Arcane Brotherhood play a prominent role in this adventure. Auril in her 3 forms and the aforementioned Twingas, a Chardalyn berserker who has been taken over by the magic of Chardalyn, ice trolls and verbeeg of various types, crag cats and spitting mimics and yeti tykes, and of course the infamous Brain in a Jar was not out until that adventure. And you get like Cobalt vampire spawn and Knoll vampires.
That's pretty cool.
Just all sorts of great stuff. And of course, your typical new items. Then the Rime of the Frostmaiden is the last appendix, which is the poem song that has inspired this entire adventure. And then there's a nice afterword by Chris Perkins, who calls out some of the folks who contributed, including Kay Irwin, the art director, who I think did a great job of finding the bleak nature of this adventure and still making it visually interesting while paying attention to that bleakness.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was really nice to see a number of different writers who had not written for D&D before and did their pieces really, really well. And I wish that there had been that connective tissue so that people really would have experienced how good those parts are. But yeah, all good authors, and many of them have gone on to do a lot of really neat things since then.
And that is our review of the best of Rime of the Frostmaiden. So I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our meanderings and our wanderings and our thoughts. And we have some folks out there who help us out by backing us on Patreon. They have gone to patreon.com/masteringdnd and backed us at one of 3 levels: Master of Dungeon supporter. The Master of Realms supporters get a shout out in our show notes. They and the Master of the Multiverse patrons get some free content that we've been doing, game design stuff. And Teos doesn't know this yet, but I'm about ready to send him a little bit of a adventure thingy that we'll talk more about next time. But if he has some time to do his editing pass and layout, we will be getting that to our backers shortly.
Exciting.
So again, you can become a backer by going to patreon.com/masteringdnd. And hey, hopefully you'll become a master of the multiverse like these fine folks. Agile Monk of Fantasy Companion Workshops. Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing. Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios. Craig Bailey, Rudy Chainsaw Basso, David Bastiensen, Derek the Bearded GM, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Bosch John from Duality Press, Calvin Bridges of Alos, Brobo Ballin, Kevin Criswell, Dead Inertia DM, Evil John, Evan at Nimbleco, Kevin Davis, Andy Edmonds at Nerdronomicon.com, James Fisher, Scott Fitzgerald Gray at Insane Angel Studios, Ted and Guyana of Frog Helmet Games, Ben Heisler and Paige Lightman, Simon the Hunter, Sean Hurst, Hyperlexic, the Jaunty Mantis TTRPG Podcast, Mark and Mary's Gaming Compound, The Mighty Jerd, JR of the Twilight Perspective, JT Evans, Brian King, Jim Klingler, Gail Kiermandy, Schwill from Maine, Leftstria, Chad Lench, Paul Mata, The Mathemagician, Sharon from Mathis Arcanum, Eric Mengi, Annabelle Meyer of Fantasy Cartography, Trey McLemore, Michael, John Mickey, Sean Malley, Dustin from Mountain and Myth Fantasy Maps, Falcon Neal, Tom Nelson of the Deck of Player Safety, DT Norris of DT and Dragons, Phil Wirt from the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, Philip and Lindsay, Frog Prince at Tentacles Squelching Wetly, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Ricardo Who Might Adventure, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Prenner from Croatia, Joe Rosso, Ozymandias Rex, Runner Rick, David Rideout, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Andy Shockney, Krishna Simons, Tim Smith, Spark from Dunner Games, Jeff Stevens at jeffstevensgames.com, Josh and Lee Wanika of the Tabletop Journeys podcast, soon to be featuring one Teos Abadia, Talos the Stormlord, Jeremy Talaman from Masters of Alchemy, Trace, Ryan Truk, Joe Tyler, Earthworm, Marcelo de Velasquez, the Valiant DM, Vidocles G, James Walton, Graham Ward, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclops Games, Javier Waziak, Waterford Wizard, Chris Webster, Ian Wright, and Z. Walt Winfrey. Thank you all so much for your support. If you can't help us out via our Patreon, no problemo. You can go to wherever you listen to the show and leave us a review, give us some stars, or go to YouTube where you might have to look at us, but you could also get this content, and like and subscribe and leave comments and do that sort of thing. Teos, where can people follow your stuff?
Find me at alphastream.org. You can get to my videos looking at the horrors of Ravenloft, the horrors within. Shawn, where do we hunt you down?
You hunt me down on all the socials at Shawn Merwin, or follow the podcast on the socials at Mastering DND. So we have survived the cold, frigid climb of Icewind Dale. What are we going to do now?
I'm going to publish the rap of the Frostmaiden, my fanfic version. It's going to be amazing.
Nice. And I'm going to make some minor tweaks to a new monster that's going to be coming out in this new adventure that I'm sending you very soon.
All right. Excitement.
Yeah.